What is up YouTube? This is Alex aka Foreign. I decided to make a little European build for you guys. I'll make a little series of videos like this. First video will be the 600 euro build. In the USA, this build would be around $560. So here are the parts. This is German pricing here. In my country of Estonia, the prices are a bit higher and sometimes a bit lower, but in general this PC will cost around 600 euros from me. If you're in Germany or wherever you may be, then these parts may cost differently, but in the 550 to 600 euro range for sure. Let's start. I will be using the website of a local PC parts shop that I've been using for years now, and they have basically one of the best prices in the country because they're probably the best PC shop in the country. But I digress. For the CPU, we went with the i3-6100. Now this is a dual core with hyper threading. It's not an i5 for sure, but it will do the job in most games. Now in CPU intensive games, it may struggle a little bit, but you will still definitely be able to play the games at high settings. CPU intensive games are, for instance, City Skylines and Total War Warhammer. It may lose up to 10% to an i5. Otherwise, this will be around 5 to 8% slower than your Skylake i5 processor, which is of course better in the long run, but with our budget for 121 euros, the i3-6100 fits perfectly well. Now for the motherboard, I went with the MSI B150M Pro VD motherboard, which is a good motherboard for the price. I mean, it's only 66 euros, and it has everything a gaming PC may need. DDR4 2133 support, 6 SATA 3 ports, USB 3, easy debug LED, which helps you troubleshoot, for instance, if there's a problem with the graphics card or the CPU or the RAM. The easy debug LED will localize the problem for you. This is a good motherboard and I think it fits perfectly into our build. Now for the RAM, I went with the cheapest 8 gig stick I could find, which is the Crucial DDR4 2400. Now the 2133 one was actually more expensive, so I went with the 2400 stick, which will basically work as a 2133 stick in our motherboard, which makes no difference and it's cheaper. It's around 3 euros cheaper. The brand doesn't really matter for RAM, especially when you're building more of a budget build. Now for the hard drive, I went with the Western Digital Caviar Blue 1TB. It's a decent hard drive. I've been using Caviar Blues for over 5 years now. Still working, still going strong. It's got 64 megs of cache, will store all your games. Now if you're in Germany, or if these parts total at around 550 euros, then you can actually add an SSD. For around 50 euros you can get a 120 gig SSD for your OS, which would be perfect because then your main programs and OS will load very quickly. I suggest you get an SSD if you can afford it. Now going further, for the case I went with the BitPhoenix Nova Mid Tower, which is your regular run-of-the-mill case. It'll fit all your components, your PSU, your graphics card, no problem here, and it's only 33 euros. Went with the window one because why not show off your parts? For the power supply, I went with the EVGA 500 watt 80 plus power supply, which will power all of your needs. With the graphics card that we're gonna run, it will be totally fine. And for the graphics card, I went with the GTX 1060 from MSI, which is only 235 euros where I live. Of course, it's got only 3 gigs of RAM, but as the benchmarks are showing, it's only 5 to 10% slower than the 1060 and around 100 euros cheaper. So I'd suggest getting the 3 gig card. Now, what may become the problem is that when more games in DX12 or Vulkan start coming out, then this card may start to struggle with those games compared to the RX 470 4 gig, for instance. And the 3 gig buffer may become an issue when you want all those anti-aliasing options in the future. So this card still has some drawback. If you're not an NVIDIA person or you don't need it, then you can always go for the equivalent pricing wise. I chose the MSI again which has shown good performance. You can also get a Sapphire card. Those are basically the two main cards I would choose from for the AMD cards. AMD cards may require some tinkering, undervolting of the memory, undervolting of the core, etc. to hold that stable clock, but the card still has 4 gigs of full VRAM, which is good, better than the 3 gig of course, and it performs better in most DX12 and Vulkan titles. So it's your choice. The 1060 is currently faster by around 15% than the RX 470, costing the same, but it may not be as future-proof as the AMD card. Of course, future-proofing is a specific term that's scary to use, but I think that the RX 470 is a bit more future-proof than the 1060. But if you're planning to sell this card in a year or two and buy the GTX 1160 or whatever comes out by then you'll be totally fine. But this is the build. If you have any questions or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. Now concerning the which GTX 1060 video, I'm working on it. It's very hard to find prices for all the 1060s right now because some of them aren't even out or aren't available, or I don't know where they're available. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with the video. It may be a little different format compared to the previous 1070 and 1080 ones. Right, I thank you for your attention and hope to see you later.